Hello, I'm Dr. Roy Armstrong. I'm the head of research at Project Wild Gambia. And in this video, I'd like to take you through the research that we're currently involved in the Gambia and explain the context and why we believe it's so important. Okay, so we have groups going out to contribute to the research. We use our ecotourism trips to the Gambia to provide extra data to add to long-running data sets on species that we believe should be the priorities at the moment. So we'll take you through and give you a little bit of an introduction. The Gambia is the smallest country in Africa. It lies on the west coast, smiling across to America. And it is basically the River Gambia and the habitat around it, and is entirely sort of surrounded by Senegal. So that's where it is, West Africa, sort of a subtropical rather than equatorial environment, and a jolly nice place to visit. From a conservation and ecologist point of view, it is extremely special because if you see here, it lies on this is the Gambia here, it lies on the border between two major sort of ecotypes. So you have the Sahel Sudan savanna forest and so on, meeting with the Guinea savanna forest. It's also, there is continuous forest from the tropical rainforests of Congo and so on, all the way up to here. So for many species, the northernmost boundary of their global distribution is actually the south bank of the River Gambia. But as a result of it being in this sort of overlap zone, it has an extraordinarily high diversity within a very small area. So you can actually see a lot of habitats without having to travel very far. Also means you can have multiple research projects sort of ongoing in a relatively small and manageable area. So very attractive for those perspectives. What I'd like to point out with this is as well, there are many conservation bodies that you'll hear about around the world who are doing important stuff, but often it's because they've got local species that are in trouble in a particular area. What we're doing is the difference between life and death on planet Earth for some species. We are talking global extinction. And to give an example, if we take the Western red colobus monkey, colobus monkeys are the most endangered taxon of primates on the planet at the moment. If you look at this is, as I say, West African red colobus. You have Teminki, which is in Gambia and Senegal and just crossing into Guinea. You have the nominate race Badius, which is Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Cote d'Ivoire. But there was another one, and the other one was Waldron's, and that actually went extinct in the 1990s. It was the only primate taxon to go extinct globally in the 20th century. So we're not mucking about here. We are genuinely talking about species that are right on the edge of existence. And we're much more about the Temminck's red colobus later, but these are the sort of things we're dealing with. Okay, so what's the country like? If you're going to come with us or you want to do research there, a quick introduction. The marine habitats are very rich. These are West African royal terns, nesting on the Bidjol Islands. The West African royal tern has recently been split from royal tern, and the entire population is basically Senegal and the Gambia. So a very important site globally for this. In fact, one of the largest colonies was previously in the Gambia, but the top of the island has washed off with rising sea levels. So we are actively looking at ways of actually rebuilding these islands to get them back. But rich for seabirds, rich for fish, and very important. So in fact, you see an example of plastic pollution here. Here's the world's largest tern, the Caspian tern, extracting blood from my forearm as we extract it from fishing line and a hook, and it had stopped it flying when it was starving on a beach and dehydrated. That one flew away. We have also managed to release West African royal tern, as well as species like little tern and sandwich tern, which from the rings we can tell were British or Dutch ringed. So our birds were there and we've rescued them. So if you go up the river, you get to this lush jungle of This is the freshwater reaches, so this stays green all year round. Further down, about the first 100 kilometers of the river, because it's such a low-lying country, it's salty water conditions, so you have rich, lush mangroves, which you'll see in a moment. But up here you have this lush greenery, which has a totally different set of species associated with it. To the north bank of the river in particular, we have the Sahel region. So that's, you go Sahara, Sahel, West Africa. This is the arid zone between the Sahara and the richer areas. And it is spreading. And you can see from this that there's considerable soil erosion. Because of overgrazing, cutting firewood, and climate change, these areas are becoming more and more degraded as we go on. And one of our big projects is actually we need to be involved with the, you'll know about the Great Green Wall below the Sahara, I hope. We are contributing with our planting to try and stabilize this and reduce the spread and the desertification into these zones. So, so that is spreading. If you look here, there's a member of our team, Wandy Toure, with some rather nice baobab fruit that he's about to make a juice drink for me from. This is the Sudan savanna habitat. So this is dry acacia scrub. I want you to pay particular attention to this habitat type. Just have a look at it and bear that in mind for one of the slides that's coming a little later. So you have the savanna, and then you have the Guinea savanna from the Sudan savanna, which is slightly richer, slightly greener. It's the one that lay to the south of the Sahel, as you saw on the first map. And here's a particularly important spot. This is a buco. And it has a freshwater, well, a watering hole. And these are really important in terms of ecotourism. So apart from supporting the animals, the chances of you or I seeing an animal that the local hunters haven't managed to get their bullets into or traps onto are minimal, because they have extreme skills, and we would have to be very lucky to see much. By creating water holes in areas of forest and savanna, you can actually lure the wildlife out, and from that actually get people to see the actual animals and to actually do some research on them. So this is really important, and encouraging water holes is something that we've been doing, again, as you'll see, at several sites. But the joy of the Gambia, in many ways, for a naturalist, is that the nature is everywhere. We've seen up to 14 species of bird of prey as we sit having breakfast. The farmland, this is actually quite close to the hotels. Even just in the middle of those paddy fields on the left, you can see there are storks, egrets, herons, ibises, cranes, all sorts of species occurring through these. So you really do see wildlife everywhere you go in the Gambia. It's a very special, biodiverse and exciting place. Okay, on to the serious stuff. One of the reasons that we are there, it is a very poor nation. So it's ranked 174th of 189 nations in the Human Development Index. Literacy is low, the median age is very young, so a lot of youngsters having to be supported. It has no mineral or other natural resources, and it is pretty much reliant on aid. We applaud the efforts of the current president and other politicians to develop the country, and things are looking more positive than they did under the previous president. He was a very bad man. But basically, it owes as much as it earns every year, as you'll see from that. So the amount spent on just servicing the debts is unbearable. So we really need to look at ways of generating income to relieve poverty in one of the world's poorest nations. And one of the ways that we can do that, and one of the areas that we're expert in, being zoologists and so on, is the development of ecotourism. Because, as I've already said, it has this really rich combination of habitats all within a very narrow zone. You can actually see an awful lot of stuff. So you're only 5.5 hours from Manchester or Gatwick, and you can be sitting on a drizzly morning back in Blighty. 5.5, 6 hours later, you can be in the tropical sun of West Africa, sitting having a sundowner, and being surrounded by parrots and big butterflies and all sorts of things that you weren't seeing in the UK at the time. So that's a great potential, particularly winter market. And ecotourism has a marvelous aspect to it that almost by definition the areas that have been left for wildlife or that's still any good were useless for anything else, as in they couldn't be turned to agriculture, they couldn't be exploited in different ways. So almost by definition, that's where the poorest people live, the people who can't really make a good living. So it's the brush cutters and people like that. So ecotourism not only spreads the wealth away from the tourist dominated coast with the hotels and so on, and where we stay, it spreads it into the most deprived areas, almost by definition, and supports some of the poorest people on the planet. So I should say as well that that's Wandy Toure standing up at the back, the team member. And on that day, you'll see how dense the mangroves are. They're impenetrable. The leaves steal all the light that comes down because it's such high productivity and they can make energy from it. That as we're going, Wandy is very soft-spoken and he said, "Dr. Roy, I think I have just seen the ear tuft of an African scops owl." Now, the African scops owl stands at about 6-7 inches tall, and the ear tuft is about half an inch on top of that. So to see that in there is just, okay, do you want us to go back, Wandy? Yes, please. So we reversed the boat and he was right, it was there. Absolutely incredible eyes. He has magic eyesight. I'm a very good bird watcher. It's my job. But I'm not fit to clean the lens caps on Wandy's binoculars. Absolutely superb. All of our team members we've worked with for years, and they know their stuff really, really well. It's a privilege to be in the field with them. Okay, and thanks, Guy, for this image. If you take, for example, the Egyptian plover, a gorgeous thing. This is the one that takes the parasites out of crocodiles' mouths and so on, only occurs upriver. And as a result of it only being there, the bird watchers who visit the country have to go and stay up country. So that is spreading the wealth from the coast to rural areas, which means that the cooks, the cleaners, the vegetable garden owners and so on all get a kickback from the ecotourism and supported. So very important. Now, even if you're not convinced that that rural poverty should be relieved in humans and the African species, it's not our responsibility to look after them. Well, please have a rethink, because it's very important to our birds. So right at this very moment, we've got reports today about Lake District ospreys wintering in the Gambia and Senegal. The Rutland ones are there. So it's very important that the species that we think of as ours, that winter in Africa, that they have the habitats available to support them. What we know from long-term studies is that it is the wintering conditions for most of these birds. It is what happens in West Africa that controls the population sizes. So we can spend billions in Europe with what used to be the Common Agricultural Policy supporting them, but it doesn't make a halfpenny's worth of difference if the wintering grounds don't support the population for them then to return. So I've got, you think of a lot of our songbirds, especially our warblers and things like that, some of our rarest birds of prey, a lot of our wading birds, you saw the terns before from the seabirds and so on, and some rarer species that we spend a lot of money trying to look after in this country, like gargany. But again, it's only what happens to them on the wintering grounds that controls the population. So how does it look? Well, sorry, it looks grim. The rainfall patterns in the Sahel, these are forecast from the American government and their atmosphere people. It looks like it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better. So that doubles up our need to look after our species by planting and maintaining habitats in West Africa. And we've had examples before. So the droughts in, for example, the late 1960s, we know that they killed 100 to 125,000 people. Now that's a lot of people. 5.5 million people were displaced. Okay, we're used to seeing things on the news, but just think about what displaced actually means. That's people leaving farming and rural areas and moving to the edges of cities where they live in conditions and have to do things to make a living that no human ought to have to ever do. 5.5 million were displaced, and the forecast is to get worse. You wonder why people are crossing the Med in paddling pools. and things. Well, here's one of your answers. And certainly the back route is commonly used by Gambians to try and get to Europe to escape this, quite simply. We know that there are current North Bank droughts. If you're on the North Bank at the minute, you will sometimes see children with pale hair and extended bellies. And you think, oh, they're well fed and they can afford to groom themselves. No, that's protein deficiency. We are seeing signs of it now. And also think about the social side of it. Those 5.5 million displaced, it's not just people going to go and try and find something. They're generally the young people. So what happens to the old, the infirm and the young, the very young? In those rural areas, there's nobody there to farm the farmland. There's nobody there to look after them. There's nobody to stop them being exploited by unscrupulous souls. It causes a massive social breakdown. So this is really, really important. And if you want examples, if you look at one of the UK's birds, if you look at whitethroat, a lovely little warbler that lives in our hedges and brightens our spring mornings. In the 1 year, the 68-69 winter, when we had the big drought, the population crashed by 77% in one winter, and it's never really recovered. You can put that with loads of other stuff like yellow wagtail down 70%, tree pipit 83. Listen, you can pause and look if you want to, but our migrant population birds are declining rapidly. So part of the British character of the countryside, turtle doves, 82%, more than 2/3 of cuckoos lost. I mean, that's part of our soundtrack every spring. And I've just thrown this in because it's one of my favorites, because the first time these nest close to where I live, and one after the first time of visiting the Gambia, I realized as I was walking along a canal that I was listening to black-crowned chagra and eramamila and lots of African birds. These are brilliant mimics. And it was only after I'd been to West Africa I realized that they were actually mimicking a lot of the species from their wintering grounds. And that's a nice connection between my village and the villages we work with over there. And if you want the science to prove it, in such variable systems, it's often hard to tie these things down. That is a remarkable correlation in there. That's a great piece of science. You can quite simply see sedge warblers decrease in years of low rainfall in West Africa. This proves it. This is the population in the UK against the winter conditions in Africa. So if we want to maintain our songbirds in the UK and other species, we need to look after these habitats. So there's the possibility of ecotourism, but what have we got? We've lost a lot already. Regrettably, when it was a protectorate to Britain, Tarquin, those lions are stealing the goats again, go out and extirpate them. And the British got rid of the lions on behalf of the locals. We also got rid of species like giraffe. Now, look at that habitat. That habitat is almost the same as the picture before, where Wandy and I were walking through the acacia scrub. These animals belong there. They are used to the conditions, the parasites, everything basically. They evolved there. So really all we need to do is put them back. They won't actually need that much maintenance. Obviously, make sure they're disease-free and things like that. So it is crying out for it to put these animals back, because you imagine the possibility of seeing these 5.5 hours from Manchester Airport. It would revolutionize the economy of these really poor rural areas. Set up lodges, have people employed doing it, and have these animals reintroduced, having their impact on the environment as well, maintaining the habitats for everything else. You get it. We've also lost these, we've lost these, we've lost these, we've lost those, and we've lost those. This is unforgivable. Imagine how much money comes into the economy of East Africa for the big charismatic species. All we have to do is create the right conditions and bring these animals back, and it will revolutionize the economy of one of the world's poorest countries. So what is left? Well, there's a fair few mammals. There's 4 of the world's 7 marine turtles. We have some good crocodiles, a heck of a lot of birds because of that overlap of the different areas, as I mentioned before, wide range of insects, and some incredible fish. And we'll go through just some examples of these now, because we're actually involved in research on a lot of these. So there's still the opportunity to see hippopotamus upriver. Thank you, Ron, for the picture. We are monitoring them. We do transect surveys of the river. We believe that West African manatee is still present, although they haven't been seen for a long time, and we will be focusing a lot of our survey work on them shortly. Leopard, we're not sure about. We've done a lot of survey work and we can't find them. We actually think that they're probably extinct. But with suitable habitat restoration, they could spread back from Senegal, from areas like Niakola Koba, and they could cross and recolonize. Now imagine how big that would be for ecotourism. Warthogs, charismatic, and anyone who's seen certain Disney productions will appreciate those. Spotted hyenas, who you don't often see, but there are times when you're out in the bush at night, you know they're watching you. And so what do we do with those species that are left and to try and develop it? Okay, we've established one of the world's poorest countries. It has a massive potential for ecotourism, and those species belong there, so they're easy to reintroduce. And particularly that ecotourism can spread well to areas that are usually bypassed by initiatives and you know, agricultural projects and so on. So Project Wild Gambia works to conserve some of the world's rarest animals, and through the development of ecotourism, assess the people and the economy of the Gambia. It's their country, it's their animals. We can combine it by helping with our knowledge. So at the most simple level, what are we doing? Well, encouraging groups. This may sound strange, we're just exploiting their environments. No, we're not. There is a brilliant youth movement in the Gambia. The older people don't get it. Why are these people here looking at the birds in the trees and spending all this money flying? Because they're bird watchers. What is a bird watcher? For people who live close to the breadline, they don't understand this luxury. But if we turn up and we pay our admission to a local forest where the money goes into community projects and so on, the next time that they're out and we're not there, somebody's coming along and they're about to shoot a turako or something particularly nice. They might say, well, hang on, don't shoot that. Why? Because the bird watchers like them. What? They like this, but this is food. It encourages people to look after their forest in a different way that they have before. And that's a really important starting point. And it supports the young naturalists and conservationists in the Gambia in getting their message across to the village elders and so on. So very important. Where we have people going and doing ecotourism, we're trying to diversify the palette of activities available. So for example, in the past, people would go up to Tendaba Camp. And it's really, in terms of the things they were offering then, there was a boat trip to Balbolan wetlands, and there was a jeep safari. What we said was, well, actually, people are interested in also going out and looking for bush babies at night. So now, instead of just going for one night, people go for 2 nights. The more we can broaden things. I mean, again, the locals they're looking at the mice in our trees. Yes, oh, they're crazy. It's something that we need to communicate across and set up and show them what their market potentially is for all this stuff. So on to the serious science stuff as well. We're very involved. It shows how quickly we can respond. A new disease, you can see monkey mouth here, a green monkey. We saw this disease in January of 2014. By April, we had a team from the University of Cumbria out to sample the monkeys and send them to Germany, where they were analysed in June at Berlin. And by the July, we put up a research group. And this is really important because the findings of this are all on our website, and you should look into it. But even if you're not that interested in the monkeys, what we've shown is that these primates are a reservoir for a disease called yaws, which disables many, many thousands of young people around the tropics of the world every year. And we now can connect that up and say, okay, and we've developed this. There are ways of treating it in the monkeys to stop it re-entering the human population. The World Health Organization has tried twice to eradicate it globally and failed because it's still in monkeys. And we know how to deal with that from the research we've done at Project Wild Gambia. One of our big concerns, greens are relatively common, but here you are. This is the one we started with. This is the Temminck's red colobus. And the thing that we feared most, Alan took this photograph and posted it, and we were in the UK and we saw it and we looked, and it's a lovely female Temminck's red colobus monkey. But if you look at her left, our right, you can see those scabs around the mouth. That was the first case that we ever saw of treponema bacterium spreading and jumping to the endangered species, which was our worst nightmare. So this was the actual sampling that we did originally with the greens. So here we are sort of anesthetizing and taking biological samples. So yes, again, you can read more about that on our website. An important development is that we've got rid of the old president. The old president was a very bad man, as I've already said, and that means that we can now look to expand forests. But they were down to a very, very small proportion of the country by the time he left. And these are little reservoirs. These are reservoirs of biodiversity that we need to spread out from. So we will work, Abuko's government owned, Pirang we are working with, and some of the other forests. So we will help strengthen them. We're helping with wells and tree nurseries and the likes. Within those forests, we're trying to encourage ecotourism by showing them how, well, making suggestions for how it might be done. So for example, in Pirang and Farasutu, you have the only African wood owls going, and they can be prone to disturbance from too many bird watchers. So we're trying to explain how you best manage tourists to not disturb them. But also we can look at doing things like putting up nest boxes. For more general tourists, we can put up the likes of lantana and attract clouds of butterflies. There are honey drips you can use for this, baiting, night lighting to look at small carnivores, things like that. Exploring all of these to encourage people to go and visit those sites. And just to show that for this site, Pirang, we got it adopted into the Global Action Plan for Temminck's red colobus. We co-authored the emergency plan. This was an emergency plan sponsored to stop this monkey going extinct. And this is one of our sites, and it's recognized as the a key site to stop this animal going extinct. We're also looking to strengthen areas that don't have Temminck's red colobus. So for example, this is Bolong Fenyo, which is a community forest in the south of the country. We're looking at sites in Sanyang, and we're in discussions with other community groups who run forests, and we look to support them both by survey work to identify what's there, but also logistical support, including the preparation of tree nurseries, collection of seeds, and so on, to get those up and running. So other areas of our research, well, we've managed to find that, well, we bumped into West African dwarf crocodile while we're trying to develop some vulture work. We're working with Luke at the reptile farm, and we've developed a head starting site there. The little crocodiles, when they're this big, are very vulnerable to predators, so it's like bogeyman snake eagles or anything like that, or terrestrial predators. So the idea is that we can head start them. If we can grow them up to this big, they're much more defendable against predators and so on. They've got high probability of survival. So we have the site at the reptile farm for growing them on. We have the site for reintroduction to the wild because we've put in a well and a water hole suitable in a proper piece of forest that's absolutely ideal for them. And in the next few months, we hope to actually catch some of the juveniles from this female and transplant them across to do that. Our trail cam studies, we've made all sorts of findings around the country by using these trail cams. These are cameras that are triggered by movement. So even when humans can't see an animal, they can. And this is an example. We had a Polish student who was very keen on photographing otters. So I showed her where an otter midden was. And they mark their middens every night. The otter at this particular site liked the new smell of the camera and must have done a headstand because it pooped on top of the camera instead of in front of it. So it didn't actually get any images. So she was massively disappointed by that. And I said, well, show me the images anyway. And I said, well, no, all there was a cat. So I said, well, show me. And we looked at this. And if you look at this, the ear tufts on the left and the long, lithe limbs on the right-hand image show that this isn't just a cat. This was the first sighting of caracal for many, many, many years in the Gambia. So our trail cams we've seen been systematically assessing the carnivore and other faunas of all the major forested areas. We also managed to bump into this handsome devil recently. We showed that servals are still extant within the country. And we have a long-term data set that allows us to look at encounter rates and population trends for many species. And just to show that clawless otters aren't invisible to the camera, this is one that we took in Pirang Bonto Forest to show that they do indeed show up if the camera's in the right place. And we've discovered a lot of other stuff. Some of it we can't mention here because we haven't published yet, but some of it is jolly exciting, and it allows us to see in a way that doesn't disturb the wildlife exactly what's going on. What a lot of people don't realize is it also picks them up. So I've deliberately chosen a bad image here because we don't want to embarrass anybody, particularly when it comes to something like this. On the clearer images, you can actually see that this chap has a rifle and a dead monkey. This is a monkey hunter from a forest in the Gambia. We went to the village elders and we said, look, you've got people hunting monkeys illegally in your forest. They said, no, we haven't. And we said, well, hang on then. Okay, look at this. And somebody from the back of the meeting shouted out, that is, and named his name. And the village used that as evidence to go and get an injunction against this chap that's banned him from ever going into the forest again, or he will be arrested. So our trail cams actually work as a remote police force to stop some of the worst exploitation. We've also used them for other things, but we can't really broadcast some of that. Some of our stuff, we work on basically all animals that are endangered and try and work out the situation. But we're also interested in what's happening with certain populations. And we have reason to believe that we have some of our agama lizards, this is Weidholtzii, but we think we've made some interesting findings on those, which we will cover at another time. When we're traveling between sites, we routinely monitor for hooded vultures. This is a critically endangered species, along with a few other species of vultures. So we're working on those. We're trying to figure out why the population is in decline in other areas and relatively healthy in the Gambia. What is it about the Gambia that makes it so special for them? Although we do note that recently there was a mass poisoning in the south where people use them for fetishes to bury under new houses and so on. So very important we carry on this work because the Gambia is the best hope for this globally remaining as a species. We're also involved in looking at forest protection of those sites are there. So this is us doing trials with bottle brush to fence off or to hedge off areas. We're working with schools and community groups on tree nurseries and so on, and identifying the best species, particularly things like rosewood and so on, because they've been massively over exploited because of their cash value. And we keep records of everything. So we're looking at seedling trials, the best way to actually encourage successful germination and establishment. Now this is an example. This is Farasutu Forest in the center of the left-hand slide. And you see that it really is just a little reservoir of forest left. And this fence on the right, this is massively important. I love this fence. Doesn't look much, I admit, but it's made out of ironwood and other termite-proof trees with a double strand of barbed wire. And as a result of us putting this fence up, the following year, the next wet season, when the people of Farasutu went in to plant trees from the forestry department, they found some big footprints and then some big piles of poo, and they found a hippopotamus. Now this site has water pools that a hippo could use to go out, and it's relatively close to the coast and the hotels and so on. So people could see hippos that close. They would travel to see it. It would make them money. They could rebuild this forest, buy land, and do the rest of it. So we're very excited about this. That fence caused hippos to be there. Unfortunately, the message of ecotourism hasn't quite made it across everywhere, and the hippo was actually destroyed for the threats that it could present to rice crops and so on. Now, the whole point of this is that if you get enough people paying tickets to come into the forest, you can afford to then pay compensation to the farmers of the rice fields and so on. But this is all stuff that we need to develop on sustainable models where nobody loses out. And just to finish on that little story, at least we had this lovely little chameleon there with Mamadou when we were on the site. A particularly important area of research for us at the moment is the elasmobranchs. Now, the elasmobranchs are boneless fishes, so they're cartilaginous fishes. So think sharks, rays, guitarfish, sawfish, and so on. And we actually think that these have gone extinct in the Gambia. We know that they were being caught up until the 1980s, 1990s, but we've seen no evidence since. So we think these are gone. Now, bear in mind, this photograph is slightly flattering. They're actually sort of up to 7+ meters long. So think of that, 21 feet. These are enormous fish that have been lost, and it's entirely possible that the species that lived in West Africa were separate from the other ones, and we may only genetically identify them after they've already gone extinct. So these are a priority species to look at. We also this was a summer trip from Project Wild Gambia, and we came across this in the south of the country, the huge racks of drying sharks. And you'll see from the left-hand image that the fins have been removed, and I'm sure you all know exactly what that means. That's going to one particular market, but the rest of the fish are being used as a dried protein source for distribution throughout sub-Saharan Africa. The sharks on the left are milk sharks, which are still relatively abundant. But if you look on the right, there we have a scalloped hammerhead shark, which is an endangered species. And this triggered us to working with a chap from the IUCN's Shark Specialist Group. And we have made some really major discoveries since then. They are published, and you can find a link to the paper on our website. So they range from everything that's, for example, data deficient, like the torpedo rays, up through the endangered species, such as guitarfish and daisy rays, through sawfish, which we actually think is extinct. And the difficulty with these species is that they only produce very few young every year. They produce a few pups, and so they can't repopulate quickly. So this overfishing at the moment, many of them might be right on the edge of going over. There is also, you may have read, some controversy over the intensity of fishing as a result of the Chinese connections, but also the EU when it comes to tuna and stuff. This is a fishery that supports the protein requirements of 400 million people in sub-Saharan Africa, the line through the least developed nations of West Africa. So it is vitally important to huge numbers of people that it's managed properly. And it's the evidence collected from our expeditions that have proven that the fishing down the food web, as Alec Moore puts it, is going on in West Africa. And so we have some of the rarest stuff. You'll remember I said about the West African royal tern that due to genetic studies, that's been reclassified as a new species. With that, we know that that will be the case of some of these rays. So here is actually a large ray that I'm measuring that is almost certainly an undescribed species. So you can't get much rarer than that. And well, we can push it with our findings, because if you look at these two, we've actually found two species of angel sharks that, according to the IUCN, at the time that we found them, had only been observed once each since 2002. This is about 15 years later. Each species had only been seen once, and we found them. So they've been seen since, and we know a little bit more about them. But that is almost by definition the rarest animal on the planet, except that we found a fish that hadn't been seen since 1870, several thousand kilometers away in Nigeria, which was the only time it had ever been documented on the planet. Not only that, but the type specimen that was kept in a museum was actually lost in 1970. So that species doesn't even have a type specimen anymore. So that is a species that has only ever been seen by mankind on 2 occasions. And of course, we are busy looking into that, and we'll continue our research in that area. We're also looking at developing our understanding of the species, not just documenting the fisheries and finding what's there, but working with Fish the Gambia, a sports fishery company in the Gambia. We're looking to catch and release. This is a black-chinned guitarfish using small tags behind the dorsal fin, and establish an online recording system so that anybody finds them, we can actually start to plot the movements, because what we really need are management strategies for these species. Okay, again, more on the website, and we'd be happy to discuss it with anybody anytime. And Atlantic humpback dolphins. There is a new global initiative this year to which we have signed up, and we're speaking to Caroline Weir, and thank you very much for the image, Caroline, and Lucy Diagni and other people, about how we can start doing. A few years ago, we were the first for many years to confirm that it was still using Gambian waters and having calves there. 2 years ago, we actually found a really good feeding site, and we had a decent population where we know we can get close enough to them to do individual IDing from photo recognition. You'll see the scars on the back of the head of that one. And we aim to formalize that this year and actually set that up as long-term transect data and photo IDing as part of the global partnership. Now, this is really important because there are only 9 known populations left on the planet, And the work that Caroline's done on the Senegalese side of the border has shown that that population is probably the biggest single population at about 100 individuals. That shows you how endangered this species is. So we're looking to expand in that side. We will be doing very shortly. Okay, so well, this is a bit creepy for us to read, but you can always come back to it. But the point is that this is tried and tested. We've been doing it for over 20 years. We know how to show people a good time in the Gambia, and we spend the first week getting people used to the conditions by ramping up slightly, starting in a very relaxed way, then getting people more used to the temperatures, and then by the second week they're then very able to go out and collect meaningful data that can contribute to these vital data sets that we're looking at. Okay, so on a finishing note, we've got some of the rarest animals. Hopefully we've made the point about the connectivity to the European countries and their species. We've got the relief of poverty, but to me, the biggest single draw of the Gambia is the people. They are the most fantastic people. They are proud, lovely, warm, welcoming people. And the only reason that they're in the position that they are in is because they were born in the Gambia and we were born wherever we were born. And they just haven't had the same opportunities. By conserving the animals of the Gambia and developing ecotourism, that can then feed back into the country's people and enable them to do it because they are proud, wonderful, capable people. We are just supporting the Gambia to look after the Gambia. Okay, thank you very much for watching. If you have any queries, please go to our website and feel free to contact the team at any time. As you'll see on the website, we have specialist research groups going out. We also have expeditions. We also have tours. If you just want to go and see the wildlife and get us to explain to you what it's all about, we'd be more than happy to, of course. And those funds that we raise from that are what we use to fund our own research and to actually do the tree nurseries and so on. We're a carbon neutral company, as you'll see from the website, and our carbon neutrality comes from us planting forests. That's the best possible way of doing it and creating the habitat for the monkeys and so on. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I hope to hear from you at some point in the future. Okay, bye.